Hello and welcome to the Low Tox Life podcast.
But it's meant to be taken every day because unfortunately we don't know when or where our plastic exposure is coming from. And even though we may have identified some of the worst habits to get out of, unfortunately there is no decreasing plastic level in this world. It's simply increasing and pretty much guaranteed to increase a lot over the next many years until something significant happens at the industry level.
Hey, I'm Alex Stewart, your host. What a show I have for you today. Those of you who are often overwhelmed about the amount of plastics in our environment, I have met two scientists, Dr. Nicholas Monsul and Eva Berkes, both physician scientists. Nicholas is a surgeon in head and neck surgery specialization, and Eva is an allergist physician and particularly passionate about environmental toxins through her work. They are co-founders of Quorum Innovations, a biotech company that have developed microbiome-derived barrier protection technologies, initially through a grant from the US government in 2023 to explore how the work and research they were doing could be used to protect people in combat through exposure to biologics, chemical warfare, those sorts of settings. They discovered something in the lab one day that made them also look at plastics. And today is that story. I'm going to let them tell that story. This one we're putting on YouTube as well. We don't put all our shows on YouTube, but because Nick showed us quite a few things to bring to life, love a good picture or a good demo, the link to the YouTube episode will be in the show notes, which is lowtoxlife.com/podcast. We can't do the show without our wonderful brand partners. And we're going to jump to those ads right now and then jump straight into this conversation. Watersco have been helping Aussies take all the bad stuff out of our tap water and restore all of the wonderful trace minerals back into our water, from their smallest 7-stage filter right through to their Mac Daddy benchtops at 15 stages of filtration. They have an end-of-year financial year sale until June 30th, and that will lock in 15% off for the life of your subscription for any new water filter you buy. How good is that? So choose a new water filter. Make sure your subscription is ticked out of the two options you have on checkout. No code, nothing complicated. You get your reminder, depending on which unit you've purchased, when it's time to get your filters replaced, and you will get that shipped to you at 15% off. Make sure that if you're in the market for a water filter right now, that you do that before June 30th, because that is a very sweet deal. Head to waterscoaustralia.com.au. AusClimate have been supporting your journey to the healthiest home possible for years. My favourite two types of appliances they have are the Winix air purifier range and the dehumidifier range, because of course moisture can happen to any home at any time. So we always want to make sure we're using climate gauges to assess whether we have too much humidity in our homes. And when it does go over that 60% mark and is staying over 60% persistently, either because it's raining or it's a humid season, all you need to do is know how to use dehumidifiers. This is something I have spent a lot of time educating on, and if you head to the @LowToxLife Instagram, you'll see there's a whole chunk of tiles on the feed with a white background. I did a 10-part series to step you through all the reasons that you need a dehumidifier and how to actually use it, what size you might need, what kind of situation you might need based on different types of floor plans. So I'm starting there because here in Australia, it is a more humid time of the year. So thrilled to have AusClimate supporting our low tox community, the Australians only, for the whole year of 2026. Use the Low Tox Life code at checkout. 10% off your order, even often if things are on sale. Enjoy. Hello, Nick and Eva. Lovely to have you guys on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We met last week and we talked a lot about the issue of microplastics. And my first question is, let's have a little bit about each of your backgrounds to see how you both ended up working in this space. Nick, why don't you start us off?
Oh, okay. Well, so I'm a doctor, I'm a surgeon. In my training, it was always emphasized to us to participate in research, in basic science research. So I trained at Yale University. Then I went on to the Johns Hopkins Hospital, where I just kept on going back to research. At first, it was something you just had to do, and then slowly but surely, I just began to really, really enjoy it. So that's always been part of my training. So my specialty is head and neck surgery, anterior skull base, and so I really enjoy that. But the other part of my life is that I enjoy having a question. I enjoy knowing something that maybe no one else in the world knows about, just because we've really thought about it and done the experiments. And so it's a big part of my life.
Is it an interesting thing to try and see when you are a surgeon and a researcher, how you can start closing these gaps between what we find out in the research and what we can actually practice? Because that's
Oh,
one of the big challenges, right?
absolutely. And so that's one thing that Ava and I are very proud of, and that is we're able to understand things clinically, clinical
Mm.
entities. And at the same time, we're understanding how clinical entities present themselves, what may be the problem, and more importantly, what hasn't worked, right? Because
Mm.
we have all the medicines and all the things to try, and we're realizing that, you know what, there's still something missing. So
Oh,
we can
those
take on,
pesky environmental toxins, way more tricky to deal with. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
So we can take
yeah.
that research and then take it downstairs to the laboratory, and literally the laboratory and clinic is they're right next to each other, and then start to peel back the layers to understand what's going on in the basic science level. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something that both the MD world as well as the research world, it just facilitates that translation and that the conversation between the two, which is I think is needed.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Ava, how about you?
I too am a physician. I don't cut on people. I am a clinical allergist, immunologist, and I did my training at University of Florida and then at Scripps Clinic in La Jolla, where you could stand in the parking garage and throw a rock and hit a Nobel laureate on the forehead.
Wow.
It's kind of an amazing place to be, the epicenter of biotech and immunology and all that cool stuff. And so we too were encouraged to learn and love basic science, which isn't necessarily true, by the way, at a lot of medical training institutions. But it's a wonderful thing to be able to work in a lab as a physician. I think you get an appreciation for what is not known and how difficult it is to know it. So that's those are the kinds of questions that we didn't leave behind, I think. We brought with us when we went into practice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how you can think you know, and then you get more information, and
Yeah.
then
Then you
you
don't know again.
evolve. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you feel like research can actually teach us in this polarized black and white seeking answer world that we've found ourselves in, especially since the advent of socials and algorithms? It feels like everything is like, I know this for sure, and here's what you do. Like it's this
Yeah.
black and white language that has really done us a disservice. What can we learn from science to get more comfortable in the grey? In the nuance, in the I don't know for sure, and I need more information before I decide or before I take a next step.
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. First of all, in science, there is no final answer
Mm.
ever, because then somebody's going to look at the same question using different tools or simply a different person and come up with something that the previous researcher hadn't thought of. So there is no final answer. And at some point, you do have to become comfortable knowing that you won't know everything, but you can still make a difference with the bit of knowledge that you have gained. I think a good researcher and a good physician, by the way, can also improve life, whether it's for a patient or whether it's for people who might use that technology, even though you don't know everything. You don't know all the answers, but what you know is good enough to be able to do something good.
Mm. And did one of you realize first that environmental toxins were a big part of the future of medicine?
Well, Ava, your entire specialty, asthma, allergy, and
Mm.
immunology, really is focused on what happens in the environment and how that affects the person,
Yeah.
right? All the way from trees and mold to dust mites to,
To diesel exhaust and
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like
fire.
it's
right,
a progression of
Well,
things that would have gotten
well,
added on that you're like, hold on, it's we're not just talking cats and dust mite now, we're
yeah,
talking
right.
all
yeah,
of this stuff.
and
Mm.
that's a huge concern because I think the Pandora's box has been opened. I think our eyes are becoming more able to see the invisible, and the invisible they're not just the allergens, they're the inflammatory irritants that affect everybody, not just
Yeah.
people who are allergic, but everybody.
Yeah. Well, we've started to know this, at least in the last decade, with mold, right? It's not just, whoa, my immune system's freaking out. It's actually systemic inflammatory cascades that can happen with certain exposures. And so plastics. Actually, you know what? Before plastics, I want to know what is it like when you decide to work together on something, given you decided to work together on plastics? How has that been for your marriage? And would you like to talk about it? No.
Sometimes we have to go to our own separate corners.
Yeah, I can see quite a big lab there, so that's good. Yeah.
We got some corners.
This is my desk. His desk was on the other side.
It's true. It's true. It's had its challenging moments, but if either one of us had to do it by ourselves, that we wouldn't be here.
Yeah, you have an amazing skill and training complement. Like that's always a great sign of good partnership.
It is too. It's like as we're coming up with these ideas by ourselves in Sarasota, Florida. We are not in La Jolla, California. We're not in Boston. We're not in San Diego, where it's the epicenter of biotechnology. And so it actually takes someone with a reasonable sounding board to say, hey, you know what? That is a little bit crazy, but it's doable. Right? And so there are many times where we're off on our own and we're talking about ideas all the way from the microbiome, what is it doing, and then what are the potential beneficial effects of the microbiome. And we are on our own over here. So it takes another sounding board, and it really takes two of us to accomplish it, all the way from patents to actually designing experiments to handling the multitude of things like buying equipment and developing a real research lab. So
Yeah. And so then, yes, let's talk about plastics, because Nick, when we first caught up, you were explaining that your road to binding toxins actually had a defense department component in the previous administration, getting some grant money to explore how to protect soldiers better, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah. The evolution into plastic protection is an evolution of our work with the DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. And so Ava and I were literally going around the world and giving talks in Paris and London, etc., about how this microbiome, the bacteria that are on us, can provide barrier protection. And so we got a call from DARPA one day, and they said, we really like your ideas. We think you should be included in the personal protection barrier. So looking at the microbiome to provide protection for the warfighter against chem bio threats. And so that really allowed us to do a number of things. It advanced our research. It allowed us to develop mechanisms here in the laboratory to test our ideas. And then probably about a year and a half ago, my son came home and he told us that he was feeding these little tiny worms nanoplastics, and they were not happy. Yeah, right. And then Ava and I were talking about it and thinking about it at the dinner table, and then we're like, you know what? Wait a minute. It's like we're working on barrier protection for DARPA. Well, plastics going into these little tiny worms too is a barrier problem. These little tiny sea worms, C. elegans, right? So the whole idea is like there's barrier protection. Like, hey, wait a minute, we're really good at that. And then what if we have something that can provide barrier protection for preventing plastics from going into our bodies?
And so before I go into the plastics into the bodies and we explore the mechanism of how that's happening now and how we might do it differently, the barrier protection term, are we talking about gut barrier? Are we also talking about skin? Obviously, there's multiple microbiomes. What did that research piece and what kind of protection did you research and produce?
Physical protection, actually. I mean, there are lots of ways to protect, of course, but we focused on physical protection using a particular kind of component of the microbiome. Microbiome, by the way, are the trillions of microbes that live in and on the human body, every single surface inside and outside. But in particular, maybe the happiest inhabitants of the human microbiome may indeed be dwelling in what is called biofilms. Now, a lot of people have heard of biofilms potentially in a disease context, bad biofilms you have to get rid of. But actually, most biofilms are health promoting. So biofilms are aggregates of microbes that live in communities, and they're protected by sugars and proteins and things that they kind of secrete to protect them in this little biofilm armor so that they can stick to human body surfaces, where they can live essentially much more durably than something that is floating around trying to figure out how to survive by him or herself. So these are little communities of microbes that have learned how to live on and in the human body by giving that human body a benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise they wouldn't have been maintained. They're only there because they co-evolved in a happy medium with the human body. So they're doing something good for us. So Nick and I essentially focused on finding and growing health promoting biofilms which can provide a physical defensive layer. That's actually how they're trying to work, or one of the ways that they're trying to work naturally in and on us anyway. So we were trying to replicate that kind of protection in a in a simpler way than having to figure out how to grow who knows how many different kinds of bacteria, let's say. We focused on one general category, which is a probiotic. Moreover, though, we wanted to make sure this probiotic could benefit potentially anyone the same way. So we focused on making sure that its activities would be present whether or not that probiotic is alive. And maybe even better if that probiotic is inactivated so that it is not alive. So
Mm-hmm.
that leaves the physical protection of that little microbe, because it's
Yeah,
not
wow.
replicating. It's not producing substances anymore. We've essentially frozen it at a moment in time, to be able to extract the physical barrier defense that it probably gives us naturally.
Mm-hmm. And so, in a combat context, and some of the things that soldiers are trying to be protected from, I'm supposing it's like chemical warfare, gases,
Biologic, yeah.
biologics,
Yeah.
exactly. So, how was it working in those contexts? Given you can inhale through your nose, and it can be the lungs, it can be the gut. Um, were you looking purely at gut solutions or all forms of exposure and contamination of the body?
Nick, did you?
Yeah, all forms of exposure. And so the really cool part about it is that we developed a test
Mm-hmm.
that was able to measure the penetration of anticholinergics and then actually protecting the eye from anticholinergics entering the eye. So it was a real physiologic test. And
And for the beginner's brain, an anticholinergic is.
it is a nerve gas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's a paralytic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we developed a very fancy test. Actually, it was very simple, but it looks very fancy to demonstrate that we can prevent these anticholinergics from entering into the eye. Simply by
Wow.
actually simply by measuring, believe it or not, is the pupil to see if the
Okay.
pupil actually dilates or not. It's intricate, but it's actually really quite simple. So
And so, with something like the eye, are you producing a spray to protect, or?
it was, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So
Fascinating.
it was just a mechanism for us to test the efficacy.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
how do we get from that kind of research and looking at chemical warfare to, gee, I wonder if this might work on microplastics in the gut? Like, what? How on earth did you guys trace that journey to see what a wider application for everyday people and a much bigger global systemic issue would
Yeah.
be?
Yeah. Well, so A was talking earlier about biofilms, right?
Yeah.
Biofilms is the stuff that the bacteria secrete and it enables them to talk to each other when they release quorum sensing molecules, right? Quorum
Mm-hmm.
innovations. Um, so we noticed actually when bacteria get together and really good biofilm performers, they actually stick to the plastic plates we're growing them on. So yeah, wait a minute.
Oh.
These biofilms really, they were literally growing up the sides of the wall of these little plastic petri dishes that we're using to grow the bacteria. It's like, that one's really growing, unsticking on plastic. You literally had to scrape it off.
Aha. And
That was,
most scientists would be like, oh, that's funny. That's like how annoying that it's doing that or something, instead of going, why is it attracted to that? And can we actually turn that into something? Is
yes,
that kind of where we're going with this?
that's where we're going.
Huh.
And then we did some really simple experiments if you want to see a picture. So this is my other son, Julian. So Finn actually he worked with the worms, came home and told us about it. And then Julian did another experiment, our second son. And so here's the idea. There are these little tiny nanoplastics, 100 nanometers big, and they're green. They're dyed green. And so over here on one side, this is the nanoplastics that are in, is it saline? Just water? Or saline?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay, just water. And so this is what it looks like when nanoplastics are just sort of floating around. And then we put this biofilm inactivated bacterium inside there, and look what it did.
It solidified it into a little kind of clump.
That's right. And they were treated exactly the same. And so this is one experiment. It's like, hey, wait a minute. I think we might have something here. So these biofilm bacteria bind up the plastics. So initially, they actually grew against the side of the walls of the petri dish, and then, look at that. They really sucked down the plastic such that it's pretty darn clear.
Wow. How cool are your kids, by the way? Like, just as an aside, inquisitive minds you've raised there. Incredible. And Eva, can you talk us through why this is powerful from a gut junction and absorption into the other parts of the body that are happening with microplastics, that we need to be thinking to do stuff like this?
Yeah, definitely. I get a little knee-jerk frustrated when I only see the word microplastics in popular media, but I'm kind of assuming that they may not realize they're talking about nanoplastics, because nanoplastics to me are even more important than microplastics. So microplastics essentially are plastics that are smaller than 5 millimeters, but bigger than 1 micron. 1 micron is about the size of a single typical bacterium. Now, nanoplastics are even smaller than that single little bacterium. And the smaller a compound, chemical, particle is, the further it can be absorbed into the body. It can cross very effectively the airway barrier, the air sacs of the lung, and the same is true for the gastrointestinal system. We normally have intact cell-to-cell barriers that are nice and tight, and they keep out things we're not supposed to absorb. Things that are typically bigger than about 10 microns theoretically have been said that, oh yeah, no, those can't cross. Well, they can, but even more easily than the 10 micron size is the submicron size, or the nanoplastics, because the smaller they are, they can stick onto the outside of a cell membrane, the wall of the cell, and then be internalized into that cell. So in doing so, suddenly this nanoplastic has been internalized from outside the gastrointestinal tract to inside a gastrointestinal cell, where then it can potentially get into the blood system, the lymphatic system, or adjacent organs. So the smaller a plastic particle is, potentially the further it could disseminate in the human body.
Yeah, that's not terrifying. It's happening to us all every day. It's impossible to ignore, right? And so just to dig into these different plastics, where do BPA, phthalates, the plasticizer compounds, PFAS, where do they all fit?
Yeah, they're plasticizers, so they're present whether they're in macro, micro, or nanoplastics.
Got it.
But because they can piggyback, they essentially take the journey along with that plastic particle. They piggyback on the plastics because they're part of them into the human body. Unfortunately, it's an effective way to absorb things like heavy metals and PFAS and phthalates and other chemicals. They just hitch a ride.
I'm thinking so many things right now. I want to ask about something you and I talked about last week when we caught up, Eva, which was when it comes to plastics, we can't be thinking that adage, the dose makes the poison, basically because of what you've just described, right?
Exactly. So ironically, if you think about it, then let's say we eat a 5 millimeter sized microplastic. That's pretty large. The body is incredibly unlikely to be able to absorb that. Otherwise, there's something really wrong with the GI barrier. But if you take that 5 millimeter microplastic and you break it into tens of thousands of teeny tiny little nanoplastics, unfortunately, they can much more effectively get in. So now where you've gone from essentially the equivalent dose, the structure that that dose takes is really important. The size that that dose takes is really important. So that 5 millimeter blob is going to pass out, but not true for the 10 nanometer, the teeny tiny ones that essentially hitch a ride crossing the surface of your cell into your body.
Yeah, with all the different hormone mimicking
Right.
properties we now know, the
Right.
intergenerational effects that we've seen in the mouse
Yeah.
studies, like
Right.
crazy stuff.
Right.
And so, I mean, clearly we don't want anyone swallowing a small piece of Lego, ideally. Would it be right in saying you're less likely to be harmed by a small piece of Lego that will eventually just pass through your digestive tract and you poop it out than for that same toddler, let's say, because that's probably a usual toddler story that the parents talk about, to heat up a takeaway container with the thin PFAS film in the microwave the next day and give that to your toddler. It feels like what we're talking about in terms of what we're starting to realize, the second thing is way more dangerous because it can be pervasive throughout the human body, whereas the piece of Lego kind of hurts one day in a poop.
Well, and to me, that's why it's so terrifying because even though we have these horrible statistics of how many millions and millions of tons of plastic trash we're generating, the thing is that those macroplastics, the plastics we can see, are adding up, but they're also degrading at the same time into all of these nanoplastics. So it's not just an additive problem. It's a logarithmic problem. And the generation plastic, man, we are never going to be exposed to lower plastic levels looking forward in time, unless something significant changes.
Oh, yeah. And we have the issue in your country right now with a lot of environmental protection rollbacks happening. I mean, it's great that a bit of money has been thrown at microplastics, but I feel like that's been done as a PR placation when the biggest industries are still allowed to just pay off politicians and get to pollute and keep making infinite numbers of PFAS products, plastic products, without oversight or design change to make things safer for us all. So do you feel like that's a frustrating thing? Like you're on the ground trying to fix it with probiotics, but at the end of the day, it's just like this never-ending feeder lane that comes into the system to create the problem, to escalate the problem.
I think, Nick, this might be a nice time to talk about our visit to DC.
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah, okay. So we went up to Washington and we had a conversation with the U.S. Surgeon General, their chief of staff. So they're very interested in what we are doing and invite us back up to participate in the STOMP program, which is being run through ARPA-H. So we went up there, we were part of the invited audience, and there was probably about, I don't know, 60, 70 academic institutions, and then us. So that was interesting. And so they presented the STOMP program, which is systematic targeting of microplastics. And what it is that it's over the course of 3 years, they're going to, for the first year, try and evaluate how do you look at plastics? How do you measure it in both the environment as well as also in the human body? And what body fluid would actually produce consistent measurements? And so that's essentially the first year. The second year is to understand what kind of plastics get in the body, where do they end up? So it's the who, what, when, where, and why. So what plastics get there? How do they get there? At what point do they start causing a problem? What organ do they cause a problem in? And then finally, how do they cause the problem? Right? So that's the year one, how do you measure it, which is a big problem. Year two, what is it actually going? And then finally, year three, what do you do about it? Right? Are there ways to further degrade plastics into something that's less toxic? Are there ways to provide barrier protection? Right? So prevent it from getting to the body. And then those are the two basic mechanisms that they're proposing. Was there another?
Yeah, well, the third year was theoretically how to protect against micro and nanoplastics.
Yeah, the first thing actually, there's barrier protection, and then also are there other potentially enzymes that would be able to chew up plastics into non-toxic byproducts. So I think those are the two sort of scientific pushes
Mm.
to
Which, dare I ask if there was any conversation about, and then how do we design better for a future with less plastic?
I'm not laughing.
only,
Don't worry, this is just between you and me and
yeah,
40,000 other people. Yeah.
only obliquely. And
Mm.
again, it wasn't very straightforward. But I think the thing is that the legal groundwork is trying to be set up
Yeah.
such that if these
It's a
petrochemical,
start. We always have to celebrate a start. Yeah.
right, these petrochemical companies, if they knowingly are producing something
Mhm.
that is toxic, then you need to develop the evidence for it,
Mm.
right? And then you might be able to go back and sort of say, hey, wait a minute, you guys produced this. Maybe you need to pay to fix it.
Mm.
I think that's the subtext of
Or
it.
change. Pay
Yeah.
or change.
Right.
Yeah. Pay or change, indeed. Okay. So we've seen the test tube. Where
Mm.
did you go from that realization that there was something to this idea of binding and almost a magnetism?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Oh, can I show you one of the picture first?
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
It's really pretty cool. I love this one.
Okay, so what are we looking at?
So we happen to have some 3 molar hydrochloric acid lying around,
Hmm.
and we put a soda can inside that 3 molar hydrochloric acid and dissolved off the outside aluminum coating. And then there's the inner bladder of every single soda can that we have. The inner bladder, can you? Yeah,
How soft is that plastic?
it's actually kind of brittle.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
so you actually just touch it and it flakes. And you
Oh,
touch it
God.
again. Yeah, you touch it again and it flakes a little bit more.
Hmm.
Um, so that's that. That that's a really big impetus to actually, hey, wait a minute, it's everywhere.
It is everywhere. And I
Yeah,
don't think a lot of people realize that these bladders exist in every beer can, soft drink can.
right. So there's that. There's always good. That's a good place to start. It's like, hey, wait a minute, we really need to do something here.
Mm, yeah. And we
Yeah.
need to go back to that old fashioned way where you pick up your bottles and then you swap them with the fresh bottles. I remember as a kid, my mum's Mauritian and tiny island in the Indian Ocean.
Uh,
We were often quite far behind, but I think retrospectively we weren't behind. We were actually doing things far more environmentally. So if people did have a big barbecue and there were soft drinks and beers, you you dropped off your empty bottles from the last party you had and you picked up the new full ones and they
right.
would get refilled at the plant and it was glass and it was just always like that. And it breaks my heart that these small islands that are totally under resourced for things like recycling or anything like that then brought plastics in and stopped those sorts of things, because it feels like that was actually a pretty decent system to being occasional rather than everyday convenient grabs.
So then we did some other experiments, and I can show you 2 more.
Yes, please.
Okay.
And so while people who are listening, we're actually going to put the clips that have the visuals in them in the show notes so you guys can watch them back if you want to see, because it's pretty amazing.
So this is actually one of the first experiments we did.
Hmm.
So first, you'll see a couple of things. One is that you'll see this larger sort of smudge over here,
Hmm.
and that is the inactivated biofilm bacterium, and they're all
Okay.
bound together. Okay,
And
and then
can I just ask you to explain why inactivated is better?
so, for example, if I take a medicine and it works
Hmm.
in, is it going to work in you necessarily? Maybe not.
Debatable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
debatable. So the same concept applies with the bacterium. If I take a live bacteria and it lives in me, would it necessarily then live in you?
No.
Maybe, maybe not. You're a different environment.
Mm.
So early on, Eva and I made a decision to work with something that is reproducible. You get this much dose, you get this much response. So
Hmm.
we inactivated bacteria, and that's how we use our metric. It's inactivated, and we were able to say, you know what, if you give this much, then this is the kind of response you get in everybody. So it's not differentiated. It doesn't depend on it living in you, and it won't live in me. Right?
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Its benefits also exist in light of its toxic exposure. So, for example, many microbes, especially the beneficial ones, unfortunately, are toxed by the toxin, which makes sense, right?
Yeah, because they're a living thing.
Yes, exactly.
Mm.
So one of the reasons why it is difficult to deal with probiotics in the setting of antibiotic side effects because of the antibiotic. But we don't have that problem here because ours don't need to be alive. They can protect even though they've been inactivated.
Oh.
It leads to a more predictable benefit, I think.
And does that mean there's something else about that probiotic strain than its living function that is doing the job?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
cool.
It's a literally a physical barrier.
Mm-hmm.
Binds up the microplastics like a magnet.
Yeah.
And it's unique because as Nick was pointing out here with the blobs on the picture, our inactivated bacterium likes to aggregate, co-aggregate actually with other members of its colony, basically. Back to the biofilms I was talking about a few minutes ago. And they are essentially bred to be able to stick to one another to create these agglomerates, these collections of inactivated bacteria. And that makes them be able to collect or to stick to other water-hating particles, shall we say plastics, because these big blobs of beneficial inactivated bacteria then bind to the micro and the nanoplastics that are floating around. And so you've got this beneficial inactivated bacterial mass that collects the micro and nanoplastics and then helps escort them away.
Incredible.
Yeah. So this right here, this is the beneficial biofilm bacterium. And these little tiny bright green or white dots, those are 10 micron nanoplastic spheres.
Wow.
And so what's
That's
interesting,
teeny tiny.
yeah, well, they get smaller. But the thing is right here, you'll notice that they stick right onto this biofilm bacterium right there and right there and right there. And so this is the real thing. And where there is no bacterium, these little 10 micron nanoplastics are not sticking there, right? So it's sensitive as well as specific.
Incredible. And then in terms of the actual research study that you've published and had people do, can you talk about how you designed that to prove what you were seeing in the petri dishes and how you started to then work on making a case for a human benefit to what the work you were doing?
Yeah, and I have to say that it's man, we were racking our brains on how do we test the effect of a potential plastic binder in people because there is no really good test. No one's really done it. It's incredibly difficult. Nobody knows what tissue to measure, what fluid to measure. Not to mention, is there an intervention that we have that might be effective so you could pick it up in a test? But there were two, I think only two articles that I came across that had to do with gum. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Gum. I've never seen an article about chewing gum. So it was interesting to me. And what I've found in those articles is that chewing gum, unfortunately, consists of malleable plastic. So you're chewing plastic when you're eating the vast majority of chewing gum. And these chewing gums release microplastics as you're chewing. So it occurred to me, well, we could just have people chew some gum like they might normally do on any other day, and then we give them a little bit of our inactivated probiotic, and then we collect their saliva and see what has been bound.
Cool.
And that's what we did.
We also went further. Then we actually tested that bound plastic in our biofilm bacterium, and then we put it in simulated stomach fluid and test how much plastic can remain bound, and did the biofilm bacterium fall apart. And then we put it in intestinal fluid and tested it once again. And so from beginning to end, this biofilm bacterium retained the plastics by about 90 to 98%.
Yeah, 90% pretty
Wow.
repetitively.
It's a good little cult leader. It really gets them on board and they don't leave.
It's a surprisingly durable bond, I guess, or attraction maybe between these little guys.
I'm just thinking, how did you audition different probiotics for this
No.
task? I mean, there's so many.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we stuck to ones that had really good safety data, a long safety history. Those were the ones we focused on initially, and then we separated whether or not they still maintained beneficial activity when we inactivated them. So if they didn't, then we crossed them off our list, because physical activity was really our major criterion.
Mm,
And there are many different
yeah.
ways to activate something, by the way. So, I mean, how you do it and how long you do it and all that are also variables that needed to be resolved.
Yeah, wow. That's, can you talk to us about the aha moment that you had? Or that must have just felt amazing when you thought, not only are you suspicious that you might be onto something, but you're actually onto something.
Yes. Can I show you a picture to show the aha
Yes,
moment?
please.
So this is a scanning electron microscopy, and it's a resolution of 1 micron. So you take a meter and you chop it up into little tiny pieces, and that's the resolution you got right here.
Hmm.
So we've been talking about this inactivated biofilm bacterium. Those little tiny dots right there, right? And they all stick together. And they make this large agglomerate that's probably about, I don't know, let's say 200 microns from end to end. But that's just one dimension. This is it's literally a agglomerate. And then we call this the Saturn shock, because these are 10 micron plastic spheres.
Hmm.
And you can see how this biofilm bacterium is engulfing and drawing these plastic spheres to it as if it were a magnet. So
Wow.
that was an aha moment, because this is not a bar graph. This is
No.
not a change in color. This is the real thing. So
Mm.
and this is the real thing. This is the real activity. And for me, this was presented very, very physically.
And are we looking under a microscope right now of some kind?
Yeah, it's a scanning
Mm.
electron microscope.
Hmm.
So it doesn't even have an ocular, because it just sort of shoots electrons and it bounces back to you. And then depending on
Wow.
how long it takes to get back to you, it produces this image.
That's incredible. There are going to be some science nerds watching this going, oh my goodness.
Oh, we have another one.
Wow. You do? And so how is it choosing plastic and not other things?
It's the nature of their association. So
Hmm.
there are materials which are more naturally hydrophilic, so water loving, they like to be wet, and then there are other materials that are hydrophobic, they don't want to get wet at all.
Mm.
And plastics are one of those hydrophobic materials. That's one of the ways that they've managed to survive so well, is that they really like to repel getting wet. Um, but our bacterium and biofilms also have hydrophobic qualities. So they too can resist getting wet. And there are multiple other surface characteristics of biofilms that lend themselves to interact with micro and nanoplastics. But the fact of the matter is, probably a reasonably large proportion of that interaction happens because of hydrophobic interaction.
Hmm. And
They
how do we, sorry, you finish, Eva. Sorry.
no, it's fine. They just kind of find each other because they're running away from the fluid that they're in.
Got it. And how do you get this biofilm to keep traveling and excrete? Whereas in some toxic exposure pictures, biofilms actually kind of connect to intestinal walls and like they're protective in the sense that there are toxins hiding under there. We know this happens with mold in some people, parasites, etc. But then they're kind of living undercover in there, causing havoc. Whereas what we're talking about actually gets excreted, right?
Well, what we looked at human cells that we grew in vitro, so in petri dishes.
Hmm.
So one of the kinds of cells that we grew were human intestinal cells, specifically in this case colon cells. Very common model of the intestinal barrier. So we wondered actually what the interaction would be between our biofilms here loaded with nanoplastic and what is that interaction with tissues, um, because one of the questions we wanted to know is, for example, if we load a biofilm with a bunch of nanoplastics, are we then essentially just delivering it to the tissues? We don't want to do that.
Mm. Yeah.
So that was our transfer experiment, basically. We wanted to see if we had transfer of micro or nanoplastics, in this case nanoplastics, to the human cells. And we found that we could load an enormous amount of nanoplastics in these biofilms without without any significant transfer of the nanoplastics to the human cells. And we could very easily remove or rinse off just passively the biofilms that contained all these nanoplastics. So they kind of keep to themselves very nicely, at least in our petri dishes.
We also did the worm experiments.
Oh yeah, that's another nice one. I forgot about those.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really another nice one.
So we fed these little tiny worms. We fed them nanoplastics, and then we also fed them the biofilm bacterium. And literally in the excreta under the microscope, you can see that it actually flushed out these nanoplastics inside these worms. So it prevented the absorption of nanoplastics into the worm bodies. And so,
Wow.
yeah, these C. elegans worms is it's an established model for GI barrier protection or GI gut permeability.
Yeah, absolutely. And is stool testing part of the picture with this kind of research as well to see what's in the poop?
It is, but it's really difficult for lots of practical reasons.
Yeah, I can
Not
imagine.
not everyone's intestinal motility is on the same clock.
Mm.
So what do? Do you tell people to collect 24 hours of poo, 48 hours of poo, and the amount of additional plastic exposure we have in our environment is unknown. So are you going to be doing a bunch of laundry and opening and closing the dryer on days when you have
Yeah.
your poop collection? Oh my gosh, there's a huge plastic load right there. So
Different
it's
people,
very
different plastic loads. Yeah.
absolutely different.
Mm.
So many differences that's enormously difficult to coordinate. So I wish it were easier because that would be really interesting. There are
Mm.
other matrices to measure in the human body, though. Um, I'm working on that one. I don't have a good answer to that one yet.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's so fascinating to get to talk to you both in a we are still asking and answering a lot of questions
Yeah,
about this in a really nascent environment
yeah.
of knowledge. Mm. Nick, it feels like you've brought things for show and tell there. Am I on the money? Did you? I saw you like grabbing things and putting them on the desk. It's like you want to show us some stuff.
I want to tell you some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a metaphor, and yeah, it's a little bit corny, but it actually you remember the scanning electron microscopy picture where it acts like a magnet, sort of sucking in these 10-micron plastic spheres, and so this explains it. It's a physical mechanism of action. So the idea is that this is a water glass, right?
Uh-huh.
And so this iron filings right here represents then the plastics that get inside of our cells.
Mm.
And so that's the plastics that goes into our cells.
I feel like I'm in year 10 science class. This is great.
It is. You know, by the way, we showed this to some people in Washington, some very, very established wood librarians. And they love this because it actually physically embodied, as a metaphor, what's going on with our technology.
Yeah.
So again, this is like plastic inside the cell, and our biofilm bacterium acts like a magnet, and it literally is able to then, first of all, prevent binding, but then also to pull plastics outside from within the cell. It's a
So good. It's,
big
I
word.
mean, that's the thing, right? We do need these simpler ways to understand the mechanism of what's going on that's
Right,
actually quite complex.
right, right.
Mm.
You hang on to this idea. It's a visual metaphor. You hang on to this idea, and you go back to all these pictures that you've seen, the picture of the scanning light microscopy, the fact that it works within there's a couple minutes, it prevents binding. So
It starts
not
binding within a couple of minutes of swallowing the probiotic.
yeah,
We saw it very clearly in people who did our gum chewing experiment
Yeah. Yeah.
because we would collect the saliva. For some people, it took 2 minutes. For me, it happened to take 5 minutes because I'm just slower.
Hmm.
Um, but the microplastics were naturally bound to and with the inactivated probiotic that we gave them literally within minutes.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about how you take this to market. And we had a really great ethics chat about the fact that this is no way, shape, or form now the quick sell clincher at the end of the chat where we're trying to sell supplements. But obviously you want this research to then turn into something that actually helps people. And supplementation is, of course, one of the ways that we can do that. How do you then take this research, your findings, what we now know for sure is actually worth turning into a product? And then is there a regulation that it then has to pass through to be approved? What was that part of the journey like?
One of the first things that we did is that we looked at bacterium that were good biofilm formers. And you remember from the very beginning, it's like, hey, wait a minute, that particular bacterium is growing against the sides of the wall of the petri dish. So that was one of our criteria. And then when we realized that's the one that we want, then we went to the FDA and we said, hey, look at this bacterium and, look at, is it producing anything bad? The answer is no. Is it have any degree of antibiotic resistance, or can it confer antibiotic resistance to other bacteria through horizontal transfer genes? And the answer is no. So the FDA reviewed this bacterium and they looked at all the data and they said that this bacterium is safe. So that was part of the journey. And then you have to be able to make it, right, at its scale, right? So what we do in your laboratory and what they do commercially, that was a chasm.
Yeah, right? I could imagine.
So they make it, we test it, like, no, it didn't work. They make it, we test it, oh, that didn't work either. So we kept on going back and forth, and that took a year. We're just about to complete that, right? That journey. So.
And this has been, 12 years of research, right? 50 patents? Do I remember that correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have over 50 patents. We have 55 issued patents in the United States and Australia, too, actually.
Wow.
In the EU. And we have another 20 patents that are pending. So our publications have been mostly into patent literature, although recently we just had a paper submitted and accepted for review in Frontiers of Microbiology.
Awesome.
So, yeah. Another
That's
paper
where we want to start seeing it. Right. How has it been received by the scientific community, colleagues, people coming across what you're doing?
Well, it's only been about 4 or 5 days now, so hasn't quite made it yet.
The phone hasn't started running hot yet.
No, it's really just off the press.
Just incredible. And so in supplement form, it's something that we would take, one a day? That's the idea?
Yeah, it's a regular daily nutritional supplement. It's best taken ideally with food. And it's hard to say how many times people typically eat. But if you're a frequent multiple small meal taker, I might do it twice a day. But it's meant to be taken every day because unfortunately we don't know when or where our plastic exposure is coming from. And even though we may have identified some of the worst habits to get out of, unfortunately there is no decreasing plastic level in this world. It's simply increasing and pretty much guaranteed to increase a lot over the next many years until something significant happens at the industry level. So
policy, there we go. Yeah. Policy. We need brave politicians It
just has to be done. But avoiding plastics as much as you can, not reheating plastics, avoiding to-go containers, for example, and also eating a high-fiber diet because that can help bind things that really don't belong in your body as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then how do we get something like this that wouldn't be economically viable for probably most people, right? To add an extra $100, well, I'm thinking in Australian dollars. I think it's $60 American.
Yes,
yeah. So yeah, about $90 to $100 for the Canadians and the New Zealanders. And how do is it a public health conversation to try and get technologies like this subsidized so that more people can actually claim it on insurance and benefit from it? Because we're all being poisoned by plastics, right? So it feels like something like this isn't just let's optimize our zinc levels. It's let's address one of the major contaminants of our time with the protection we know we now have. Is that a huge leap to try and get this to almost be seen more as a pharmaceutical product in that sense, where you could claim something like this on insurance because of the magnitude of the problem of exposure in the environment?
Whenever it goes to pharmaceutical, then it has a tendency to make things a lot more expensive. And it might be potentially like the COVID virus testing, where it was made essentially for free because it was a national emergency. Alternatively, perhaps we can come up with different formulations that are more economic.
Yeah.
Right?
Or scale would create economy as well.
Yes,
Right,
exactly.
right. So we are working on scale. So I think we have scale in hand and in our line of sight, but potentially, and I'm beginning to think that different formulations that would be more economic to make, more widely distributed, and it's safe. There's no cold chain here, right?
Well, and it's inactive, so it's probably got a much more stable shelf life.
Absolutely. And it gets shipped a lot of different places. So
doesn't need to be refrigerated to transport it around.
Right.
That's always good.
That was a big motivator.
Yeah, that too. So I don't know. It might be a solution that's approached from a couple different directions.
Yeah.
Make it more affordable, and also with the regulatory aspect, the government intervention.
Yeah.
To support something like this. Yeah. But the first thing that we need to do is actually get the paper noticed, get the paper read, and to continue our trials and experiments. Yeah, that's what we're working on.
Love it.
Yeah.
I've just been so happy to meet you both and to be able to dive into this science in a really awesome, nerdy way where we actually give it the time. These scientific journeys we don't often think about. People like you both taking for years and years in the background, just trying, asking questions, trying again, failing. That is, to me, one of the great demonstrations of what progress actually looks like. It's the intention to give it a red hot go and then don't give up until you hit something. So we really appreciate you taking the time to share it with us. QI601 is the name of the actual product. If anyone wants to look that up, I'll pop it in the show notes as well. And we'll have the research papers, and we will definitely do a YouTube version of this show because we had so much visual show and tell from Nick there too. Thank you so much, both Nick and Eva. You're awesome.
Thank you, Alex. It was a
very, very nice meeting you.
Thank you for joining us in listening to this week's show. If you're not already subscribed or following the show on whatever platform you listened, please do that now. It helps enormously in terms of getting this show out to more people. Another way you can connect and support the work we do so that we can support you in your low tox life is join us in the Low Tox Club. You'll get access to amazing member masterclasses where we invite some of our best show guests for a live Q&A with members. You also have great shopping discounts from low tox businesses and honestly, the nicest low tox community Facebook group that exists on the internet. I do hope you join us there. It costs just the price of a coffee a month on average. Head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the Explore tab, and Low Tox Club is the first option there. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.